Coming up on Network Africa. The United States sanctions leaders of Sudan's Rapid Support Forces, Mohamed Dagalo, accuses the group of committing genocide in Sudan. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi says China-Africa cooperation will not weaken but only grow stronger. Plus, authorities in South Africa say rise in teenage pregnancy in the country has reached an alarming level. Details in a moment. Welcome to the program, everyone. I'm Joke Rogers. Let's get right into it. Sudan's Rapid Support Forces has responded to the United States, accusing it of double standards and failing to effectively address the ongoing crisis. It comes as the U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, accuses the RSF of committing genocide, imposing sanctions on its leader, Mohamed Dagalo. Mr. Blinken says Mr. Dagalo is being punished for his role in systematic atrocities against the Sudanese people during the 20-month conflict. He notes that the RSF and allied militias are responsible for the murder of men and boys, even infants, as well as brutal sexual violence against women. The RSF leader says the U.S. actions may complicate the Sudanese crisis and hinder negotiations to address the root causes. African Affairs analyst Oluseyi Adeyemo joins us from Lagos. Welcome to the program and a Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, Joke, and thank you so much for having me on the program.
Right, so first, what do you think led to the U.S. decision to impose sanctions on the RSF leader, Mohamed Dagalo?
Truth is, I had expected this decision for a while. It is clear to all of us that what is happening in Sudan is definitely a war against humanity. You can't have two people just decide overnight to say that, oh, we don't like the arrangement between us and we don't like the way things are going as regards what has been happening between us as individuals, and for that reason incite the people and start a war and start to kill your people. I believe that, in my opinion, on both sides, they have continued to sort of, run a war against humanity, because I believe that there is no country that can be isolated. Whatever happens anywhere in one way or the other, whether indirectly or directly, will affect the rest of the world. So for me, this decision by the U.S. is coming, yes, a little late, but it has come because there's a need for us to isolate one of them. We cannot continue to have both of them as strong as they have been for the past 20 months, that the war have continued to ravage the people. They've killed, they've maimed, they've raped, they've stolen, they've done all sort of, committed all sort of atrocities against humanity, in my opinion. And I think that I'm happy that at least this has come at this time, because like I said, there's a need for, one of them, when I mean one of them, one of the groups to be isolated, because in my opinion, both of the groups are definitely not doing the right thing for the people of Sudan.
Right, and how do you think this move fits into U.S. policy towards Sudan and the ongoing conflict in the region?
Clearly it's shown that U.S. is not going to agree to the continuous callous behavior that they have melted against their people. So I'm hoping that the incoming president, who will be sworn in a few days from now, will take it from there, and going by the way he does things, maybe he will be more decisive than the outgoing government, who had kept this for long. I must confess that the U.S. definitely have their hands full with what is happening between Israel and Gaza and Russia and Ukraine. So it's unfortunate that the rest of the world wants them to continue to do everything for us, but that is the situation that they found themselves. So I'm hoping that the incoming government will take it upon themselves to do the right thing and make sure that this
We lost contact with Mr. Oluseyi Adeyemo, who's been speaking on the crisis in Sudan and, of course, the steps that the U.S. has taken and how it affects the politics in the region. We'll try and reconnect to him if we can and get back to that story. But in the meantime, let's move ahead with other stories. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi says Beijing's efforts to develop relations and cooperation with African countries will not weaken regardless of the changing international landscape. Mr. Wang made the remarks during talks with Congo's Foreign Minister Jean-Claude Gakoso in Brazzaville on Tuesday. Mr. Wang is on a week-long Africa tour to Nigeria, Namibia, Republic of Congo, and Chad. He says that Africa has consistently been the destination of the Chinese Foreign Minister's first overseas visit each year, reflecting China's long-standing policy and tradition, and demonstrates China's dedication to strengthening unity and cooperation with African nations, which remains a cornerstone of China's foreign policy. Let's get back to African Affairs analyst Oluseyi Adeyemo, who's been speaking to us about the situation in Sudan and the latest sanctions being imposed by the United States. Let's just continue with the discussion. What do you think could be the implications of the U.S. accusation of genocide against the RSF?
Like I said earlier, maybe this will help us to isolate one of them. Yes, you cannot get an immediate, effect because they still have their strength, they still have their gold that they've been stealing and selling. But it's important to do this because then those who are supporting them from the outside, the likes of Egypt and the UAE, will probably start to have a rethink on the support they've given to them so far. Unfortunately, the world, in my opinion, we've been all wicked because when you see a war like this or a situation like this, my expectation is that we will generally, or all of us will completely criticize and stand against it, but you still have people who in one way or the other are standing and supporting them on the side. So one expects that this kind of stand by the US will send a very strong signal to those who have continued to show support for them and give them the support they've received in the past 20 months that have given them the strength to continue the war.
Do you think all of these will affect the humanitarian situation in Sudan, particularly in terms of access to aid, medicine, and of course other relief items?
It has affected it drastically. I mean, we have reports of them, literally blocking access to those aids. We've heard of stories of them even stealing them. There are cases of them even going after those aids and taking them off because, of course, like I described them earlier, they can only be described as thieves, people who have decided to inflict very, very, grievous punishment on their people. Sometimes one just wonder the way we human beings behave, sometimes the way we go about doing things. So I'm hoping that the stand of the US would maybe send a very strong signal, because that is the only thing we can expect from this, because as it were, you can only do as much as you can do from the outside. So one is expecting that this will send a signal and we then start having a situation where the people can start getting aids. I mean, when you see what the people have passed through for the past 20 months, it can only be described as carnage over a people. So I just hope that this would be able to turn the situation around.
Right, and rightly so. The United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs estimates that more than 11.5 billion people are now internally displaced as a result of this ongoing war. Aside from trying to negotiate for a ceasefire and getting one party, to be weaker than the other, as you have just described, what can be done for those millions in need?
Okay, as it is right now, they can only help those who left Sudan to Chad and the rest of the countries that are around them. Those are the people that can get immediate help. For those who still remain in Sudan, unless a total war is declared on the country, and which also could be interpreted in another way that U.S. is, probably, starting a war against the Sudanese and all of that, So, and then, might start up all sort of diplomatic, qualms and all of that. So it has to be treated with a lot of caution and all of that. So we can only pray and hope that God will help them, because there's really nothing that can be done other than just make sure that pressure is being put on at least the RFF, so that they can get them more weakened, and so we can be dealing with one, because as it is right now, we're dealing with two evils, and that I don't think is something we should have allowed to fester for this long. So for the people who still remain in Sudan, it's an unfortunate situation. We can only hope and pray for them that one way or the other they would allow, maybe this pressure will allow them to let them have access to all the humanitarian support that has been, sent to them. But the truth is, nothing much can be done to them, because you can then go into another person's country and start to kill them. It would be interpreted in the diplomatic quarters in another way.
Thank you very much for your time, African Affairs Analyst Oluseyi Adeyemo. Thank you for your time on Network Africa.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Now to health matters. The Nigeria Center for Disease Control, NCDC, is stepping up efforts to guard against the human metapneumovirus or HMPV, as it's working closely with port health authorities and states to ensure strong preparedness at all entry points into the country. Speaking with Channels Television in Abuja, the Director General, Dr. Jide Idris, said Nigeria remains at moderate risk for the virus, but emphasized that the government is closely monitoring the outbreak and implementing safety measures to strengthen response capabilities. Dr. Idris also revealed that testing for the virus will soon begin, with plans to assist states and significantly increase testing capacity nationwide.
Generally, we've not been testing for HMPV because it's not been a major thing. But now, we've heard about this now. We're trying to see how we can increase the laboratory capabilities to be able to test for that. And again, it presents just like many of these respiratory problems, cough, fever, sneezing, all those funny things. And there's no known drug for it, and there's no vaccine for it. So it has to be treated symptomatically, just like the flu or the common cold. But again, the idea is that unless the health workers have increased level of awareness, so people who they see, there is one of the things they have to have in their minds and start testing for all those things. So one of the other things again is that alerting the state governments. Also, they have to be on the lookout, establish their own preparedness and response capabilities. Those of them that have treatment centers or solution centers, just get them ready just in case you may need this. We are not going to quarantine anybody right now. But if there's going to be a need, we have to do that. You don't wait until you need it before you start looking for. So the idea is preparedness. I got a call from the Chinese embassy, and I think they misunderstood what was sent out yesterday. We'll try to douse that tension. But once they finish their own gap analysis, especially with respect to the institutional reports, they will let us know when they're going to start. And again, they need to work hand in hand with FAN, because they can't they need to work hand in hand, or else they're going to disrupt the activities at the airports.
Welcome back. Child and teenage pregnancy have reached an alarming level in South Africa. This comes as almost 90 young girls became mothers on Christmas Day, with the youngest being a 13-year-old. The news of the minor led to the arrest of a 28-year-old man who is charged with statutory rape. Statistics show that more than 122,000 teenagers gave birth in 2024, with 2,716 young girls aged 10 to 14 in the mix. Teenage pregnancy has a ripple effect on these young girls, as many of them have older men taking advantage of them. In another province, on the first day of the year, a 16-year-old gave birth to her second child, fathered by a 35-year-old man. Different organizations have called on the government to act fast and address this catastrophe. Let's get more on this. Joining us from Johannesburg, South Africa, is Dr. Shahida Umar from the Teddy Bear Foundation for Children. Great to have you on the program today.
Thank you.
Right. So what's your reaction to this alarming statistics on teenage pregnancies in South Africa, particularly among minors aged 10 to 14?
Well, I think, you speak about teenagers and we speak about children birthing children. And that's a very sad thing that we are talking about. For the Teddy Bear Foundation, this is a tragedy, disrupting the life of a child birthing a child. Let's just look at that image and pause for a little while to see the future of the child that is given birth and the newborn baby that comes into the world. If we just look at their life cycle, their trajectory, and the many challenges that they would have to live with and face, it becomes a real concern. So yes, we are horrified, we are mortified that this is a scourge of violence against girls, violence against children, where we require immediate, swift and urgent interventions to prevent this kind of heinous crimes being committed against children. It is a criminal offense. You've described statutory rape. You've alluded to the fact that many of them are adults preying on vulnerable children, vulnerable girls who are not in a position to give consent. The legal age of consent is 16. And you mentioned already that a 16-year-old had given birth to a second child. So we're talking here about criminal offenses, sexual offenses that are committed against children, which is something that is unacceptable, cannot be condoned or justified.
Right, and what are some of the factors contributing to the high rates of child and teenage pregnancies in South Africa?
Well, and I'm glad you asked what are the factors, because there are numerous factors, and we need to look at it from a systemic lens. There's no single causal effect here. One has to look at poverty, the transactional sex that we are seeing as a result of poverty, the socioeconomic crisis that many families face, where families, in exchange for sexual favors, are receiving remuneration, are receiving money for food, for shelter, for school fees. So these are, that's another huge risk factor. But we also find that if we look at the advertising industry and, the glamorizing, the valorizing, the grandiosity and the eroticization of sex is actually concerning, because what children see it's sex exaggerated. It's an exaggeration where they feel that they are missing out. The subliminal message is that if they do not engage in sexual activity, they are missing out. So the exposure to the internet pornography, we are finding that younger and younger children are accessing pornography as well. And the lack of paucity of sexual knowledge, that's another huge concern, where we find that parents are grappling with the challenge of how to engage or communicate with their children around sex and sexuality. Yes, there are comprehensive sexuality education programs at school, but that's not sufficient. In a number of studies that we have conducted, the children have indicated that they have had to explore information from the internet, from peers and other sources, and unable to engage in a dialogue with their parents. So that's a huge risk factor as well. But we also need to be aware of the fact that our laws and the regulations are not stringent enough, because people are getting away with it. We're just finding that more and more young girls are victimized as a result because cases are not reported, and when they are reported, they are, crime kits are not collected, or the lack of gathering of forensic evidence, the lack of proper and thorough investigation. So as a result, these cases fall through the cracks, and then people continue perpetrating and violating children. But alcohol and drugs is another contributing factor. And then gender-based violence, we cannot dismiss or disregard that. That's a huge contributing factor, where we find that young girls, even when they refuse and say no, often we find that the response is that these girls are actually teasing, and they want to be pursued. And that's something that also needs to be addressed.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, you spoke about, laws not being stringent enough. So what gaps exist in the enforcement of laws aimed at protecting minors, and how can these be bridged?
So I think, we need to look at the different pieces of legislation. If we look at determination of pregnancy, the question I'm going to ask you is, what is the age of a TOP? And the response, often people say 12 years, but actually we are seeing 10-year-olds birthing. And so a 10-year-old can appear and arrive at the clinic and receive a termination of pregnancy. But if a 10-year-old requires any surgical intervention after that, that 10-year-old needs permission or consent from the legal guardian. So if there are any complications, one cannot proceed. So look at the surgical intervention, the termination of pregnancy, the age of the legal age of sex is 16. So there's anomalies here. The pieces of legislation do not speak to each other. And I think this is where the challenge lies, where government departments need to get together and synergize the pieces of legislation to ensure that perpetrators do not fall through the cracks.
Right. Dr. Shahid Umar of the Teddy Bear Foundation, thank you so much for your time and for explaining, even though as difficult as this conversation was because of the minors involved in that scenario. And we continue in South Africa, where the country is mourning the loss of its top actress and singer, Winnie Khumalo, who died at the age of 51. The family who announced her death said that she suffered from a short illness and died on Tuesday on her way to hospital. The Afropop singer was known for her long musical career, which began in the 1980s and also appeared in popular South African TV series. She is best known for her hit song, Live My Life, and has collaborated with prominent South African artists, including the late Brenda Fassie. And finally, on the program, are you stressed or are you overwhelmed? Well, you may want to join the Rage Room in Nairobi, Kenya, where you can just vent your anger and let it all out. Let's see what it's all about in this next report.
This is a Rage Room in Nairobi, Kenya, a place Kenyans are turning to relieve stress and the frustration of everyday life. The Rage Room offers a unique and unconventional therapy experience through a controlled environment to help many vent their anger. Guests dressed in protective suits and helmets have the room to themselves, which features a range of household objects like televisions and glass bottles with a baseball bat. The founder explains the idea behind this.
The healing room is a rage room where people come and get to feel relieved after feeling so overwhelmed. and it's a deviation of the traditional therapy. So this is one of the exposure therapies that we have. So people just come scream. If you want to scream, cry, vent out, break things in a controlled environment, not similar to the traditional therapist where people sit down with a professional therapist. The idea of the rage room came from a conversation we were having with a friend, and the conversation was how traditional therapy was introduced to us Africans. It was introduced in a way where it was directed to the psychotic people. So there is a lot of stigma and discrimination around it.
Visitors expressed their enthusiasm for the method of therapy.
The reason I'd come to the range room is because, depending on the economy, life nowadays, it's somehow hard. So to start my year, I saw it good to come and try this rage thing because traditional therapy is expensive, and it's also a good thing to try new things. So for me, I feel relieved. I feel much better than I was before I came here. Yeah, and I'm a happy man, as you can see. I came here not so happy, but now I can afford even to smile. At least I've vented out my anger. Yeah, and I'm very happy for this.
The Rage Room offers a range of packages with prices from 1,500 to 7,500 Kenyan shillings for a 15 to 60-minute session. The Kenya National Commission on Human Rights has estimated that 25 to 40% of people seeking medical attention in the country are experiencing a mental health condition, underlying the importance of finding a way to engage people in therapies to help relieve their burdens.
Wow, that is something. That's it on our program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Joker Rogers. Bye for now.